Grigory, please take your seat. Good afternoon, dear guests. We start the final session, the final plenary session for today, which is called Citizen Territories Tomorrow, Tools for Positive Change. My name is Alexei Muradov. I'm a partner of the Strelka Design Bureau, and I will moderate this plenary session. We expect a very interesting discussion and also very interesting participants. So I would like to make you familiar with those sitting in front of you. Alexander Vysokovsky, Dean of the Graduate School of Urban Studies at the Higher School of Economics. Mikhail Kuzovlev, President, Chairman of the Board at the Bank of Moscow, and he is also Chairman of the Public Chamber of Moscow. Andrei Sharonov, Rector at the Moscow School of Management in Skolkovo. Grigory Revzin, partner of Strelka Design Bureau, professor of the Graduate School of Urban Studies of the High School of Economics, and special correspondent of the Kommersant Publishing House, and Mr. Ivan Kuryachev, the managing partner of the Novaya Zemlya company. And today we will discuss the regional agenda of the Moscow Urban Forum, because it consists of three things. First, it's actually the number of regional conferences we carried out in Russian million cities. And Bank of Moscow was participating very intensively in these conferences, and the Skolkovo and High School of Economics were also deeply involved. Second, it's actually the study prepared by the Graduate School of Urban Science together with the Novaya Zemlya company. And this study and survey is devoted to the analysis of the human potential in Russian cities, and we will also discuss those topics which have been discussed within the original program of our forum. We also have several mayors in this hall, and I really hope they're with us today, and I hope to get them involved into our discussion. I was told that Alexander Moore, the mayor of Tyumen, Stanislav Mosharov, mayor of Chelyabinsk, Mr. Nikolaev, the mayor of Yakutsk, they will be also involved in our discussion and also exchange of opinions on the city development. And the experience of the Moscow Urban Forum in terms of regional conferences and different studies and surveys shows that despite the fact that our cities are really different in terms of geographical location, also in its structure, in its social stock, and also cultural background, they all are facing a significant modernization challenge because the cities are remaining being underinvested within the 1990s, within the last decade too. And the main problem is the transportation, development of the public transportation system, how to adapt the city environment to the significant number of private vehicles. Another problem is actually how to provide the affordable housing, the housing for rent, and so on. There are also significant problems in the area of utilities. Also, we have significant problems in the developed territories. I'm talking about the residential and industrial areas. We also talk a lot about the increasing of comfort in the city environment and how the citizens can be involved into the resolving the city problems. But it's actually quite worth mentioning that the mid-sized and small Russian cities are facing the challenges within the competition in for resources. In this case, there is a fight for technology, for the manpower, and so on. and it also sets new requirements to the city management and to the quality of the city environment. And when we overcome to the post-industrial model of economy and society, the role of high qualified professionals goes up, because it is also main factor for the future of every single city. And the Graduate School of Urban Sciences of the Higher School of Economics carried out together with the Norway Similar Company a very interesting study, which is shown on one of the cubes here in Manir. They studied the human potential as a driver for the development of the Russian cities, and I would like to ask Alexander Vysokovsky to make us familiar with the results of this study. Well, am I going to show my slides or not? You probably use the Tribune in order to make your presentation. Good afternoon. It was quite a full day. That's why I would like to apologize for getting you bored with the results of this study. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of Moscow Urban Forum, because we were offered to carry out a study before this event. It was a study which accommodates a general view on the Russian cities today, because cities are quite complicated and it was really difficult to identify what is the most interesting and important thing in the urban science today, because the lack and the problems we just heard from the moderator. And one of the most important problems is the problem of human potential, because we considering here every human being not as a kind of faceless resource for the economy, but as this normally someone who has skills, knowledge, health, and professionalism to participate in the development of cities. That's why we focused on human potential, and this topic is not really new. Since 1970s, the topic has been started quite significantly, but first of all, in terms of human capital, and the human potential differs from the human capital not significantly. Normally, human potential is a potential of a certain territory or a city for the future development. So we used those approaches which are normally or typically used in these cases, and which are normally recommended for the interstate, interregional studies. And we have to say that small or similar studies have been already carried out in Russia, but at the regional level. But if we work at the level of cities, it requires specific opportunities. We thought quite for a long time how we can measure the human potential. It was the key problem, because as any other econometric study, we have to provide statistics, because we don't have any statistics from the cities at a federal level. If we have to collect statistics from different sources, so it was quite important for us to choose the exact indicators and exact survey methods. And the matter I'm gonna talk right now is the result of our choice, and also a proof that this choice was done very accurately and the results are meaningful. Because how can we measure the human potential? First of all, that's the educational level of the urban population. This is actually can be calculated out of the number of students. We take not only the volume of students, but also the percentage of those who really graduated from the schools with a high result. Or the second is the number of people with higher education, with academic degree. The mobility, the overall mobility for cities, and the mobility among the children, especially the infants. And we took this infant mobility for the last 3 years in order to avoid the fluctuations which may occur in a single year. And the second one is the welfare. We measured the welfare as an average remuneration in a city, but weighed against the consumer basket. We also included into this study some regional centers in order to compare the cities to a certain way. It is quite clear that we are not able to compare the cities with Moscow, but nevertheless, it was something what we did. That's why we considered only those cities where the population is above 350,000 people. So we started 63 cities. We also used the specific method of standardization. We didn't take any absolute figures because in this case the million cities can be even more important in comparison to smaller cities. We just weighed everything per 1,000 citizens. And in this case, smaller cities are getting more beneficial. So we start using another standardization. All the measures were done in specific groups of cities because we split it in the following groups: less than 250,000 people, less than 500,000 people, from 500,000 up to 750,000 people, and more than 750,000 people. So we got three groups of cities, and on this slide you can see that red are those cities where the human potential is high. On the left you have the group of cities with a low level of human potential, and there are 35 cities with so-called something in the middle. And now it is quite interesting how representative these data are. That's why we did several measurements. First of all, we carried out a sociological study. We polled around 5,400 respondents. It was an online poll, but we managed to question quite a significant group of people. But first of all, I would like to tell you, you can see the cities, and it's really not worth saying that these cities are better than the others. We only split the cities into groups only for the study purpose, because this group we have million cities like Yekaterinburg, Krasnodar, and Chelyabinsk, and smaller cities under 500,000 people like Yakutsk, Belgorod, Ulan-Ude, Cheboksary. And the human potential which we are identifying by this way doesn't depend on the number of resources and the urban economy, because the cities with a low human potential accommodates the cities with a similar size like Volgograd, Perm, Omsk, Samara. These are really brilliant cities with a very significant history, but in this study they showed a very low results, like also Kaluga, Bryansk, or Arkhangelsk. What does it mean? First of all, it means that this sociological study showed that the leading cities had the following results for the answer: whether the people really like to live in the city. Around 80% of the respondents gave a yes answer, but the outsiders showed here the result of 50%. So the difference is around 33%. So these cities with a high human potential have 30% more people who are satisfied with the quality of life in the city. These charts show you the answers for the questions whether the people are satisfied with the remuneration level and whether they can find jobs in their profession. So we have the red line of those cities with high human potential, and blue line is these other cities with a low human potential. Approx 25% of the respondents say yes in the leading cities and say no in the outsiders. And if you look at the chart at the bottom, is similar in terms of structure. And what turned to be really more important, this is migration and the growth of population. The left column shows you the cities with a high human potential. Almost all the cities have a positive dynamics in population growth. Moscow is not a leader here in terms of population growth per 1,000 people. Yakutsk, Tyumen, Yekaterinburg, Ulan-Ude, these are the cities which manage to attract people which have a much higher population growth. They have a demographic population growth is even higher than in Moscow. And if you look at immigration, because migration to Moscow is very significant. Around 880,000 people came to Moscow, but a lot of people left Moscow. Around 350 to 400,000 people. So the positive balance is of 500,000 people. But if we compare this data per 1,000 people, the smaller city show a better rate of migration. If we look at those cities who have low human potential, they have a negative population growth, except for a couple of cities. So we can see that the human potential is directly linked with the population growth. The more people you get in the city, because they are interested in a city with high potential, and these people are normally educated and prepared, so you can increase your human potential, and this is the connected circle which can help cities to develop. We also checked another thing. I'm not able to show to you the mathematical calculations or correlations or measurements ways. We also took into account several factors which are accompanying the cities with high human potential. First of all, these are cities where there is a balanced investment into the human development, into the education, into the healthcare, into the improvement of quality of urban environment. In this case, these cities go up in this ranking. It is quite obvious that the cities with high human potential are not the industrial leaders. Uh, on the other hand, those cities who are at the bottom of with the human potential, they manage to keep the traditional industrial development. These are cities like Perm or Samara. These cities have a significant industrial development but low human potential. We also compared the housing market in these cities. We just checked how many new housing facilities were commissioned by 2012. These are not recommendations for the cities. This is only our study, and these results are aimed at thinking what is happening. What is more important for us? These cities have a more intensive investment and construction process, so the construction permits are given much easier than in the cities with a low human potential. So if we're talking about the housing or land market, the conditions are much more attractive in these cities. If we are talking about the high transit traffic, 70% of the cities with high human potential, they renewed their airports, so they increased the capacity of the airports, and the airports with low human potential managed, only 30% of them managed to do the same. And the internet development, because internet is very important, and the higher the internet is used, the better opportunity you have to get an internet access. It is not a direct link, but when if you have internet access in the city, normally the city gets a better human potential. And what is the result? We can see that the economy of scale gives us a right picture how the current cities are looking like today. The larger the city is, the more resources it has to develop the environment. But we also analyze that the economic background is not the result. It doesn't promise the higher level of human potential, because there is another picture which can be caught. And this picture shows that the effect of scale is not so important. This picture makes the feeling of a citizen more important, how the city where you are living allows you to implement your own potential. Probably, if the city has 300 or 300,000 people, and it gives the people an opportunity to implement their potential, so the people would like to stay, but only stand to about 10% are willing to change the city, and that's why the rest stays in the cities. That's why not the whole Russia went to Moscow or St. Pete and is quite happy in their own cities. That's why we have a ground to say that there is another system of managerial actions which contributes to this picture, because they can be satisfied with their own cities. In Moscow and St. Pete don't really differ from Yakutsk, Irkutsk, Tyumen, Tomsk, or Yoshkar-Ola. It is just another management system. It's not an alternative management system, because the scale effect and the agglomerating and the economy, and this is the right directions. We have to use them, but it doesn't save us from the necessity to work in another paradigm, because we need to work on making the city attractive for people. We need to fight for professionals, for active people. So this is the result of our study. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alexander. Let's applaud. These were very interesting results of your study. Please take your seat. I have a few questions to you and Ivan and Mikhail. So, to sum it up, if we summarize the level of human potential, what does it mean about the city? Just in a nutshell. For instance, you have a city with a high human capital. What kind of, or high human potential, what kind of city is that? Could you name the city? In my opinion, this is the city which is friendly to its citizens. First, this is the city which has a range of options, which has educational programs as well as diversified medical services. It has diversified economy which allows people to find jobs, in particular those jobs which are good, and not just jobs which have low income, which have low salary. I didn't mention it due to the lack of time, but it's important to mention those cities which have excellent leisure and entertainment opportunities, which have a well good arrangement of public areas where people like spending their time. As far as I understand, you assess the quality of social politics which is conducted in the city. Because here you listed healthcare, education. I wouldn't call it a social policy. This is the policy of the city development, which includes the social policy and also the economic policy. What are we focusing on? We are focusing on the industry, and if the industry is within the city and we don't let it go outside the city, or we say, for instance, that the industry may go, but the educational sector should stay here. I'm here speaking about relations, but not only about the social policy. Could you name the triad, or maybe three or five leading cities or outside in cities? Because not everyone have seen the slides, especially those who sit in the rear. Once again, I want to say the mayors of the cities should not be upset. I mean those mayors who are in the cities with low potential. This means that our ranking system, rating system, shows that in some cities the metrics is not sufficient and we need to level the situation up. Yekaterinburg, Krasnodar, Chelyabinsk, Kazan, Novosibirsk, Tomsk, Tyumen, Irkutsk, Cheboksary, Belgorod, Yakutsk, Ulan-Ude, Tambov, Stavropol. These are the cities which have the highest indicators. These are the cities with but we have other cities with low indicators: Omsk, Volgograd, Perm, Samara, Astrakhan, Ulyanovsk, Ryazan, Lipetsk, Kostroma, Kurgan, Kaluga, Arkhangelsk, Bryansk, Murmansk, and all the rest cities, about 35 of them, are the cities which are somewhere in between. But since we are in the Moscow Urban Forum, we can say that Moscow yield to Makhachkala in terms of human potential, but it's better than Kurgan. Now, here at this forum, we cannot say that. It's not correct. It's not politically correct. But where can I say that, if not here? There is no such a place to say such things. You should not distort numbers. Moscow has higher potential, human potential than Moscow, and St. Petersburg has even higher than Moscow. Makhachkala is quite a curious city. It has quite a good increment, and from different points of view, this city is very sensitive to statistics, and there is an impression that statistics deceives us. So the city is still on our list because it's quite a curious example. It's like a rare butterfly which has quite extraordinary colors and unusual colors. Moscow and St. Petersburg are in this list. On this list, they have high indicators, not too high. So this is the level of Stavropol, right? Alexei, you try. Well, you see, I'm trying to properly position the Moscow because we're in Moscow, but you should not do that. Once again, I repeat that the level of the human potential doesn't depend on the number of people living in the city. Stavropol is a great city. Happy people live there. They're not outsiders who just dream of Moscow and St. Petersburg. I believe that happy people live in Yakutsk and Tyumen. And I don't think that they feel inferior if they don't live in Moscow. It's not so. We should not compare specific cities. We should compare groups of cities with different number of population. Thank you, Alexei. You mentioned the very interesting indicators, but you didn't mention the quality of management and the ease for business in these cities. By the way, I mentioned the business opportunities. I didn't draw any direct correlation because we do not have statistics that can reflect in quantitative terms, the business conditions. Because our business unfortunately lies in informal system which could not be measured. We have here a representative of a large business. This is the bank business, which has been actively cooperating with the regional and local authorities. This is Mikhail Kuzovlev. Mikhail, do you agree? Do you agree? And do your estimate coincide with Alexei's estimates in terms of human potential and business opportunities? And maybe you have some another opinion. Well, I have a few comments. The discussion reminds me of a well-known film where the specialist on entomology goes to Sumatra to catch butterflies. This film is called Deja Vu. And then he studies the housing and utilities sector of Odessa, and different problems arises from that. Today we talked about human potential. Undoubtedly is extremely important for the city because the human potential determines competitiveness. But this is the medal of two sides, the coin with two sides. Because on the one hand, the city attracts labor force and investments, taxes, which are so important for the city's infrastructure. And human potential should be converted into entrepreneurial potential. You know who entrepreneurs are. These are very happy and industrial people. It's like KVN. This is the club of smart and witty people. But if we have a look at the statistics, we could find some paradoxes. And we found such paradoxes in the statistics of doing business. And Russia, according to these statistics, was somewhere between Africa and Asia. But statistics is a statistics. In any case, we should draw conclusions and try to make necessary changes. We have all the tools for that. Speaking about actual trends and speaking about business communities, it seems to me that business community is now turning its face to the problems of the cities. I represent VTB Group. The Bank of Moscow is dealing with the municipal businesses. Our main partners are cities. When we made a decision to support the urban forum, our decision was based on pragmatic reasons because we can fund those things we know about. When we conducted 5 regional meetings and we went far beyond the Moscow Ring Road, I once again saw that the problems of our cities, despite all the differences between Moscow and Makhachkala, Kurgan and Kaluga, are still the same, whether we'd like it or not. But this is so. This is the environment we live in. We know about the business cycle of goods, and everyone has its cycle. First, we need to be given a birth, then we need to live, and then die. And of course, to have a good, comfortable living means no stresses. In my opinion, the problems of all our cities are housing and utilities sectors. I would like to now give the floor to you because you have the presentation dedicated to this topic. I think you should push a button, a green or a red one. Housing and utilities sector is all our life. This is how and where we live. Unfortunately, statistics is not comforting because the deterioration of housing stock is from 60 up to 70%, and this is the difference between Moscow and Makhachkala, the small city and the mega city. Unfortunately, this trend is continuing. Every 100 kilometers of heat pipelines has lots of accidents per year, and our housing and utility sector companies have 30 or even 50% less efficient than European companies in the same sector. But on the other hand, this brings new opportunities for us, because according to the estimates for the restoration of the housing utilities sector, about 10 trillion rubles are needed. If we compare the budget of the 2015, in the budget we have 15 trillion rubles. So the market is really huge, and if we take into account that 3 million people work in this market, in the market of housing and the utility sector, and this is just 8% of private investors, and we organize this investment process correctly. By the way, here in this room we have business representatives and municipalities. We can ensure the good balance. So on the one hand, our people can be provided with good conditions, living conditions. On the other hand, and others can generate profit on that. But we should have a look at what curbs investments in the housing and utility sector. In my opinion, there are a few problems everyone is speaking about, and we try to push our legislators to make any changes, but we still fail. So we have a very low payment discipline. These are not we, the owners of houses, who pay their energy bills and so on. We know how energy companies collect money, but then there's money collected for electricity, for heat, and so on, do not reach actual generating companies. Maybe if we have a licensing procedures, the situation will change. I know this from experience of Kazan and some other regions. The settlement center, which every city has, unfortunately, they are privatized in some of the regions. So those settlement centers work without any financial responsibility. But solution is very simple to make the system transparent. The settlement centers should work together with banks. For that, we need to conduct a tender, and of course, this work should be conducted jointly with the government. This is a strategic sector, and we can split different payments. You who live in Moscow, you know how convenient it's to pay for all the services, including heating, energy, and so on, to pay using the same bill for all those services. And all the companies that generate heat and electricity will receive payments from us, being financial agents. When investors come to us and, for instance, say that we would like to invest into the upgrade of a boiler somewhere, and we are going to use either coal or gas or timber there, we are not worried how the investor is going to do that. But the problem is that this investor will not have a return on investment because of misbehavior of the intermediary companies. One of the problems of such a business is, so the most important is to ensure the transparency of the business. If we have a look at Moscow experience, we can say that it's possible to address this problem, to resolve the problem. We just need to bring this problem to the federal level and to find solution there. Since there is a question now, what and how housing in Chile sector could be interesting for the business, I can tell you that you can earn on such projects in cities. For instance, you can install special meters in blocks of houses. Then it's possible to install and to replace, for instance, replace city lighting. I told you that we are 50% worse than our European colleagues, and the mechanism that we have now in place, this is the presence of tariffs. So this helps the companies to earn money and to generate profits. But the tariffs should be set properly. During the last year, only only one plant received, only for one plant the tariffs were set, and this doesn't attract other businesses if they do not have their tariffs preset. There are different projects, and not only the projects related to the upgrade or something else. There could be different projects which are well funded and which generate profit. It includes installation or reinstallation of heat pipelines. When, for instance, VTB Group acquired Bank of Moscow, it had a look at the experience, accumulated experience. Unfortunately, not all the projects are listed here, but now we try to use the experience which was generated in Moscow in other regions. So housing and utility sector is the sector which could be very profitable if we have a transparent system. This will be attractive for the business, and if it's attractive for business, and by the way, this sector includes mostly small and medium-sized companies. This implies that the human potential will be very high. Therefore, you're welcome to study our experience, to participate in urban conferences or in urban forums. At the very beginning, being from the financial sector, we didn't understand what urban means, and we wondered what effects could be generated. And now we see new business ideas and business senses. So we suggest our colleagues from the financial sector and our clients to have a look at cities, at the housing utilities sector. And of course, we should not forget about citizens who live in the cities. The Bank of Moscow believes that it should be the trendsetter. Of course, we could not be the leaders in the housing and utility sector, but still we believe that it's also possible. By the way, we have a project with the bicycles. But if we do not follow other cities' examples, and if we don't change our attitude, we won't be able to change the situation. Yes, Moscow is a northern city, but have a look at Stockholm, where people work on foot and they ride bicycles. Even in the winter, they don't try to park their cars where it's prohibited, because you know that destruction is in heads and not everywhere. But if we put our efforts together, we'll be able to generate quite good results. Thank you. I have a question. I have a question. Thank you so much for presenting the experience of Moscow. I understand that this is the experience of Moscow, which was accumulated for years, and you mentioned that different laws and bylaws are needed. You are correct. This system was established at that time, many years ago, but it's being constantly upgraded. You know that we have the federal law on the overhaul of blocks of flats. But not everyone has a special technology for payment collection and for supervising over the use of funds. Based on such products, so to speak, we have a system which allows us to implement the projects of such type. It's possible to split the payments and make the payments convenient for people. The experience of Moscow enjoys high demand, and the cities with a population of 6 million people conducted tenders, and our proposal won. Our bid was accommodated. So it's possible to use our system to collect information about the payers and to collect the payments by the special systems which belong to local municipalities. And by the way, this actually is very important for the city, for the country, because here we speak about the data protection. Such system collects information about people, and you can find different information about people. It's one thing when private servers are used for storing the data, and it's another thing when governmental authorities store the data. So I don't think that the private hands should own such data, not because business people are bad, but because their functions are different. We also need to conduct tenders among the banks who will provide clearing services in other cities. That's it. In different cities, there will be the single payment system, and the responsibility for the split of payment should be on a regulated organization. So, as far as I understand, you have quite simple recipes. There is nothing complicated in that. Now, I would like to invite Andrei Sharonov to participate in our talk, since you also participate in the regional program as the Bank of Moscow. I failed to find the answer to one of the questions which has been worrying me for a long time. Maybe you will be able to answer, being the former federal official, and you worked in at the Moscow level. You were a businessman, and now you represent the circle of academicians. For the successful development of cities and infrastructure development, there is a range of quite simple recipes. So the question is, why our cities? And by the way, we visit different cities, and the situation, regardless of the human potential, is not very good. Why our cities are lagging behind in their development? And why so these simple recipes could not be of use? Alexei was with us. He just thinks, or he pretends that we know more about the federal program than we. But it's not so. It seems to me it's very important that this year the Moscow Urban Forum is physically beyond Moscow, and it's physically beyond Manege Exhibition Center. And it was conducted all the time here, and was conducted quite successful. So I believe that the task of this forum, urban forum, one of the largest forum, is to conduct educational work. These 5 trips we made together with the Bank of Moscow, and Mikhail Kuzovlev was also a participant of all those trips. There was also the group of people who are in the executive committee of the Urban Forum. So our trips were of educational and data collecting function. When we visited those cities, we managed to meet quite an interesting group of people who represented local authorities, regional authorities, and also city authorities. I don't mean only city planners and developers, but also those people who deal with the charity and public spaces, and so on and so forth. So these are the city activists. This year we visited Ufa, Nizhny Novgorod, Yekaterinburg, St. Petersburg, and Vladivostok. Next year we're going to change the cities that we're going to visit, but still these 5 cities will be among the most active cities. You can familiarize yourself with them during the next urban forums, during the next urban fora. So the question you asked was about slow development, and I would like to refer to Leskov, who said why we are still clean our rifles with bricks or with stones. So the station is like he said that we are still in our cities clean our rifles, our guns with stones. And honestly speaking, the urbanist ideology is still inaccessible and is still perceived as something exotic, as something which exists in parallel worlds. And we don't have it, we have no money, and we have to deal with the leaking pipelines. It seems to me that it's important to conduct educational work for people to see that other countries and other cities do not have much money, because we all believe that others have lots of money, but we do not have it. This is an illusion. I understand the scale of the deficit is different, but I believe that the problem is not in purses, is not in our pockets, but the problem is in our heads. So we need to try to show modern urban approaches. We need to try to show what other leading countries do. And these leading countries are not the richest. These are just the smartest cities. Maybe I did not directly answer your question, but one of the answers is that we lack smart decisions. We do not have necessary authorities to address the problems. So we see that some people are quite they are not willing to dispose or to give out some of their functions. And I know that next year there will be 5 other cities: Tumen, Novosibirsk, Kazan. Yes, these are quite bright cities which managed to develop quite well and they advanced quite well. But we're trying to pick up leaders who will then become regional leaders, and there they are going to form sustainable communities to translate urban topics, urban ways of development for the Russian population to have a look at this not as a black hole, not as a problem, but as a possibility to negotiate and to find a solution.
Thank you much, Andrei. I would like to ask you one small question. Moscow was several years ago made a significant change several years ago in terms of spatial development when we get this turn towards the comfortable city environment, to the parks and gardens. What was the trigger with this very turn? Obviously, it was due to the new mayor and new team, and it was absolutely clear that they had a task in order to show the difference, to do something what can make them different from the previous results in order to make them remarkable, not only in the country but also in the world, because Moscow is competing with the global big cities. I don't want to analyze the whole policy, but I think that one of the main conclusions we can make now was the policy of openness, because the I remember when the first urban forum was conducted, and I really know that the Russian agenda is taking a significant place now. And the first urban forum was devoted to the Moscow and the rest of the world, and the rest of the world came to us and said that they had a feeling that we Moscow stopped inviting us because it managed to resolve all its problems, and now this openness, this readiness to discuss all the problems and to say we have problems and we're ready to discuss them, please give us advices. Well, do you remember the contest for the city agglomeration? It was probably a tiny one. We had 10 teams competing with each other for this $10,000. It was a very significant visibility of Moscow for the whole world. We had 10 teams with from several countries of the world, and the whole world saw that Moscow was in need of expertise, was in need of advice in this contest with Zaredi. I heard in from arrogant experts here that they were seeing in Moscow an example of one of the most interesting architectural city development contest, which was dealing with the heart of Moscow, just 250 meters away from the Kremlin. And this policy of openness also helped to bring a lot of new ideas, and I really like the ideas which were burned here. The importance of social space is quite difficult to make the whole city an exciting one, but if you understand that the people who come to the city can see that 5 or 10% of the city became more beautiful, the idea of embankments, it was also born while an open discussion in it was said a lot here, the form that the embankments are significant potential. These are very expensive land lots which should be also developed. That's why we got a significant turn due to the policy of openness, because the Moscow government was able to hear and to listen. Thank you, Andrei, and I would like to connect Grigory Revzin to our discussion, who was also participating in a contest of the Moscow agglomeration development, and as far as I remember, he was participating in two teams, and Grigory was quite intensively accompanying us in, on our road trips to Russian region. In one of the presentation, he mentioned that a Russian city normally accommodates two cities: a post-industrial city and an industrial city of a Soviet type. And these two models are competing in the same urban environment. And the driver for the post-industrial model development is business, and the driver for the development of the Soviet model is the city administration. And the question is it possible to make it so that the efforts of business and the government can be coordinated and aimed at the modern trends of urban development, and why it doesn't work now? Thank you, Alexei. I think it's quite a global question, because the idea to discuss this post-industrial development here was due to the fact because this was one of the first topics of the first Moscow urban forums. That's why it was interesting to understand how it can work in a Russian million cities, where we carried out the local conferences. And I can tell you right now that the industrial way of development is something what they can still continue. For example, if you look at Perm, they have hundred thousands of workers and they manufacture a lot of different products. It is a pure post-industrial city, so it should continue to live as a post-industrial city. On the other hand, the post-industrial city sets absolutely different standards of life, especially in terms of industrial areas, and the city development is quite specific there. Many of our regional conferences showed, and I don't know whether we have examples outside of Moscow where the old industrial areas were so renovated into included into the city development. For example, Zarya plant in Vladivostok. Vladivostok is a very interesting example here. Or even if you look at Novosibirsk, they got a new plant. It is a kind of business incubator in the academic city. Sometimes these industrial areas may also cover up to two-thirds of the city territory, and they are normally fenced. And if the city is not really well economically developed, so these industrial areas are normally depressed. And what to do with these areas? This is one of the most acute questions for the Russian urban science, because I'm talking about the functioning and non-functioning industrial areas, because we know examples from Switzerland and Germany where the old or functioning industrial areas can also become a part of urban space, and you can also walk a street and see that people are working in their production halls, and it gives you a feeling that the city is living and everything is functioning. If we manage to do it in some way, it would be very interesting. But the question of renovation of these industrial areas when they are actually out of service, this is a question. Because Vladivostok is, for example, please do not talk among yourself, other people don't really understand. This Professor Preobrazhensky said it before me. We kept the logics of industrial development within our city administrations, because every new function, even in a post-industrial area, we create a new industrial area, because Vladivostok, with its new university, where we have the whole shoreline occupied by the former military industrial areas, and the city is killed because it doesn't have any access to the ocean, and everything is done on a new island, but it doesn't improve anything. It is actually quite uh, not really good in the modern urbanistics. Within the last 3 or 4 years, we got a lot of ideas implemented, but at the beginning, it is really worth talking about these ideas, but I don't see any real tools which can let all these new good ideas work, especially in the Russian regions. Thank you, Grigory. And now I would like to connect to our discussion the youngest participant, Ivan Kuryachi, which is the supervisor of the study presented by Andrei Alexander Vysokovsky. Ivan, I would like to ask you, what was the result of this study for you, and what task do you set for yourself as for the urban scientist of a new generation? What did we miss at the previous stage of development? What the old bollocks didn't see, and what the specialists of the new generation can contribute? Thank you very much, Alexei. First of all, I would like to tell you that the study we carried out has a continuation, that the indicators and the indices that we used are the basic ones. They're also used as the target indicators in the social economic development programs. A good example here is Belgrade, because Belgrade has been considering the human potential index as the main indicator of the regional and urban development. And the city is quite successful in doing it. It has very good indicators of investment activity, growth, the life expectancy is the highest in Russia, except for Moscow, St. Pete, and Caucasian republics. So I think it's a very successful example where the people really started getting focused on people, on human potential, and managed to integrate it into the social economic development program for the region and the city. These are those things we present in our study, and they are normally sometimes taken as a basic indicators for the short-term development programs. Because our plenary session is called positive tools for the positive change. So these tools are used by people, and we showed with this study that the cities with a high human potential have a lot of registered businesses. So we cannot split the social indicator from the economic one because these two indicators are well linked, because people normally invest into their assets, they pay salary to the employees, so they create additional value. So people are a resource for economic development, because people normally do business and influence their development, and they require the quality of urban environment. I would like to ask you, because you don't need to tell us about the people, it is quite clear. As for myself, I can tell you, because I really like this system approach to the urban planning, because the study I participated in is considered by myself as a platform for me and my colleagues to make project solutions. I'm talking about the project solutions for the development of Russian cities or regions, because in Russia we don't have any basic definitions or no knowledge base for the city development. We have a lot of wide spots in the statistics, in the description of management tools for the social economic development. So the work, the job we did is something what is eliminating the white spots, and is something what is building the new platform for the project activity, and I will also work on this strategic projects in the future. Thank you very much, Ivan, and I would like to ask a short question of all the participants, to the panelists, and then I will also ask the audience in the whole. My first short question is, when you started this study and when we started our regional program, we were living in other economic and geopolitical reality, and the oil price was much higher, and the ruble, who had a better rate to its euro and dollar, and the situation with Ukraine was more understandable. How do you consider the next year? Are you positive? Will the city budget have enough money to invest into utilities, into the special development, or do we need to stay for the next year more cost efficient and save money for other projects which can be implemented afterwards until 2020? I'm really laughing at this situation that the media would write tomorrow that the panelists of this session think that we didn't have money for the further development for next year. I would like to ask about your opinion. For sure, this situation tends to be more complicated. Nevertheless, the cities are areas where the people live, and most of Russians are living in the cities, are urbanized. So these problems will be resolved. So there is another experience which is quite typical for Russia, that all the best solutions are made in Russia when there is a shortage of money. When there is enough money, we don't make right decisions. So I think it will be quite positive. I think this is something what is misleading us, that everything is good when we have money in the budget in the economy, because the main shortage is in the absence of right projects and ideas, because when we don't have big money, when you have just normal money, that's a time to consider, it's a time to review critically where you are and to search for new ways. Because one of the crisis advantages is the possibility to renew, because the cities don't stop. It is not a company where the people continue to live in cities, and it can be a very productive moment. Thank you very much, Alexander. Mikhail, your opinion. You know, the economists have an opinion: when we are limited in resources, the competitiveness of a nation goes down. And my colleagues already mentioned it. In order at under these conditions, it is possible to search for non-standard solutions or innovative ways. That's why I can say it will be not easy, but the investments into infrastructure, utilities are very important, and they have a significant essential important part, but another essential part is a Russian made. For example, if we're talking about the road construction, we use our own materials, which we can find in Russia, and these materials can be financed by the internal sources, and nothing will stop, because the business society and the government will find more efficient ways for resolving the problems. We need to learn how to administrate this process, and our competitiveness depends on us only. Grigory, you're welcome. I'm really happy that the colleagues are so positive here, because in this case I can express another opinion, because the urban science is a very uh, is a profession of freedom, and we have military urban science, but it is a separate area of science. If we don't have any money, so we won't develop at the same pace as we used to do it in the past. And I think by the middle of the year we will understand that we don't have any money anymore. But as for the decisions and solutions made during the crisis, the consultancy will suffer first. As for the decisions that we make for free, they normally are too deep to be implemented, and sometimes are not really suitable to be implemented in reality. So thank you, Grigory, Ivan. Now it's your turn. I remember the previous credit crunch and the projects which were stopped at that moment of time, when the professionals started thinking about the quality and not about the quantity. And I think we are currently in a similar situation. I'm sure the main targets will be reviewed, and they will move towards the quality of environment, to the quality of projects, to the quality of strategies. And I think it's quite a positive impact. Thank you very much. It will be complicated but interesting. If you do have any questions, please, you're welcome. Or any comments? No questions. Oh, I can see volunteers. You can also, please, use the microphone and introduce yourself. I hope you can hear me. Good afternoon, the audience and the panelists. My name is Svetlana Vladimirova. I'm representing Association of Sensor Marketing, because we're uniting professionals in the area of high tech, how it was mentioned by Mr. Revson because we're dealing with people's emotions. I would like to ask those who carried out this study of human potential in Russian cities. It was very interesting to find out about the points of growth. But did you consider the human emotions in this city? Because there is the indicator of people's happiness, how many marriages were concluded, how many children were born. So I would like to thank you for your reply in advance. And I'd like to add one more thing. I would like to make a proposal on behalf of our associations in the area of further studies. You can also do it afterwards, but now we'll answer your question. Unfortunately, I know these kind of studies. I think it's a very productive way, but it's quite difficult to measure. So we didn't measure it, and we also didn't do any some other interesting measurements. For example, how the density of cultural events in the city or the number of active people in the local societies. And we didn't really measure the area of cultural initiatives. You are absolutely right. So we got a task to carry out this study within a quite a small time frame, and normally these studies were carried out in Russian regions, but we did it in Russian cities, and we wanted to start from the very good level, which can be clear and for everyone. But the level you mentioned is the next one. I will be happy to work with you on at this level. Thank you, Alexander, and I would like to offer our mayors to express their opinions. Alexander Moore, the mayor of Tumen, is here. Alexander, you updated the master plan of your city last year. Please tell us what are the main areas of development in your city. How do you understand the modern city? Do you have any comments to our topic? Because Tumen was mentioned here several times. And also in terms of human potential, it would be interesting to listen to you. Good afternoon, dear friends. I'm probably the only mayor who remained here in this hall. Leo, we can applause you. It was quite interesting to see the humanity in the list of cities with high human potential. As for our master plan, we adopted it quite a time ago. And our main target is, so we have our master plan for the city until 2040, and we all expect to have 1 million people living in our city, and the trends of the last years. So our population grew by 100,000 people within the last 5 years. So within the next years, we can become a million city. So our master plans already takes it into account. And I also have a proposal where the Bank of Moscow can invest money. So we belong to the VTB group, but as we used to say that the good thing cannot be called utilities. I'm talking about the overhaul of our houses, because the current system that we're having, we need to set up a regional operator, and the risks you mentioned are minimized in terms of payments and transparency of situation, because we say that the owners of our flats are quite passive and they won't collect money on a separate account. So we started a 30-year program in Tumen, and we already have some money, but we need additional investments to overhaul the houses. We can support the small and mid-sized local construction companies, the local manufacturers of construction materials, because when you overhaul houses, you can use local construction materials. And the next one is a psychological aspect, because the people are really afraid to pay in advance if they need to save money to wait where the overhaul can be done, but when the overhaul is done, it is quite easy for the people to pay for the job done. So we'd like to invite you to Tumen. And in the end, I would like to give the floor to Sergei Lovkin because he's heading the Department of City Develop or Urban Planning Policy. Sergey, what is your opinion about this study result? Because you represent the Moscow government here. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear friends, dear panelists. This session was devoted to the results of studies of different international companies, and the main focus was made on PwC study about 7 cities in the world. Most of them are Asian cities like Mumbai, Seoul, or some Chinese cities, including Moscow. And the main conclusion of this PwC study was that we are behind Beijing, but we are now closer to Beijing in comparison to the previous year, and we got a larger distance from the third place. That means that Moscow decided to be more open to to identify what is right or wrong in Moscow. That's why we started developing dynamically into the right direction. Moreover, we also asked the PricewaterhouseCoopers to carry out another study among 11 cities which are not emerging but already sustainable or developed in terms of city development indicators. Why did we do? Because we think they see this PwC study gives us information of today or shows the trends of the last 3 or 4 years, and the investments into the city development shows the same urban indicators what of the next 5 or 6 years, how we're developing the transport, the housing, the utilities. This will be shown in Moscow in 3 or 5 years, how the social spaces can be organized, how the utilities function. The main thing we saw there that we are within the top 3 of these 11 cities, and the dynamics are much as the highest one. And the Moscow has the fastest growth rate. It is quite important for the future results, but it is quite important to reach, but it is more important to keep the results. We cannot say that we can do everything, we manage to do everything. It is quite important to work hard and to get a positive feedback, not from the urban scientists, but also from the citizens. Thank you.
Sergey Ivan.
Thank you so much, Sergei. Let's applaud him. So now we're making the bridge to the second day. And if today we highlighted global topics, tomorrow all the topics will be focused mostly around Moscow. They will discuss how to preserve today's dynamics and how to catch and overturn Beijing. Thank you.